have a video of Dr. Jeremy Agre, who is living in the Ivory Coast, share a little bit of what God's doing through his video, through his life and his business, and in the region there. And then we'll invite Wanjau up to share a little bit more with us. Okay, so I'll turn it over. Go ahead, RJ.
Well, it's our pleasure to introduce you all to Dr. Jeremy Agre from Ivory Coast.
As you said, my name is Jeremy Agre. I came from the Ivory Coast. I live in the Ivory Coast, the southern part of the country, and I am an eye surgeon and also on staff with the navigators. Yeah. I would say part of the Navigator Africa leadership community. Of course, I will maybe come back and say, practicing medicine and working as a navigator staff, I did not plan for it. It just came naturally. And I remember one day my little doctor asked me, Dad, who are you? Are you a pastor or a doctor? And she was 6 years old. And so for me, it's part of my regular life, serving people, and according to the time I have. 10 years back, we had a civil war in Ivory Coast, where we were, two politicians were fighting, and one of them from the north, the other one from the south, and this has led to a major civil war, and I have to flee to Ghana with my family. And in Ghana, I was working in a mission hospital as an eye surgeon, and I was offered an opportunity to stay in Ghana and work there all my life if I want. Yeah.
But what happened from that?
What's happened is after 3 months, things started setting back home, and as a family, we need to make a decision whether to stay or to come back home. And we took some time praying, listening to God, and I gave the opportunity to each member of the family to express themselves, and it was obvious that God was calling us to go home. And based on the fact that it was clear to us that the righteous will live by faith. So coming back home was a faith act, and also the fact that God is the one who can create a peaceful environment of where we are. It doesn't matter even if we are in a place of turmoil. So we came back, and we can now look back and say it was a good decision. God led us during that time.
Jeremy, this is Eric. While you were making that decision, if I think of my own life, those aren't probably easy decisions. So how did you work through that with your family? What were some of the considerations as you were you knew God was calling you by faith and the righteous walk by faith, but how did you guys get to that point, and what were kind of the dynamics in your family to get there?
Yeah, it wasn't an easy decision. I can tell you that, because of, I've seen the civil war, I've seen the insecurity, people killed, including some people I know. So coming back, it's really a decision of uncertainty. I remember some friends who also flee to Ghana, but they were living in refugees camp. But me, I got an opportunity to be in a hospital. I was offered a job, a furnished apartment, a better salary than what I was earning home. Yeah, 3 times my salary when I come back home, when I was working at the mission hospital here. But we took time to fast, including the kid and my wife. And after that, after our fasting time, we pray, and everybody were willing to come. But as the father, I needed to make the right decision for them. So I decided, I took some time to pray, and God gave me that verse that the righteous will live by faith. It was obvious that God was speaking to me. So I've gone through, I will not the same situation when I was to resign from my work with the government and join full-time to lead the Navigator Ministry. And that time, the Lord spoke to me clearly that I'm the one calling you. And I told him, you know, I will say yes if only you give me a warranty. And the answer was instant. I am your warranty. So based on all this, I know God was clear and I needed to obey. And so that's how we made the decision to come back home. Coming back home has given me as opportunity to serve my community as an eye surgeon. I am one of the senior eye surgeon in the country and the only glaucoma specialist in the country. If you need glaucoma surgery, you have 90% of chance that it will be Jeremy who will operate on you. Yeah. And so it was obvious that God is at work. And we started the private eye clinic, and it is fully funded, self-sustained. And now we also started the private humanitarian NGO, and we are now in the process of building what we call the humanitarian eye hospital. From there, we will have a team. Several team goes to many places to serve people. But our plan really is to have a place where we can train nurses and eye surgeons so that we can have more and more doctors serving our people here. So,
how do you balance, Jeremy, the heart for making money and the heart for the poor?
To tell you the truth, the heart for the poor makes me happy. When I go to the north, I do cataract surgery, people are really grateful. You know, you can't believe that how the blessing people give. I can send you pictures and video. You know, even this morning, a lady was telling me, may God help you live longer and give you a lot of money. So it's amazing. Last time, the staff people say, no, I was jobless and you invited me to work with you. Now I can earn a salary, have health insurance, and you are even thinking about, can we have a project to help us build houses? So it is, my mindset has changed, and I think it is very important. I basically think I see more now when I read the Bible. You'll be amazed, but I think God is a businessman. And for me, business, it just has a project, vision, and you follow it.
So how is your business ministry?
I have a Bible study in my office here. With my staff, we have a Bible study. And there is one of the navigator staff, Tise, who is now back home from Niger, when I'm not available, who come to lead. And so this is, the staff are happy to attend. This is one thing. The second thing is also my discipleship meeting, Bible study. Several of them, I do it in my office. So it seemed to me that it is, so my office is not just a place to see patients, but it's also a place for me to do my Bible study, a place for me to read, and sometimes I can even take a nap here. So for me, that's part of my life. One thing is, I have one of my habits is to pray for all my patients for surgery. I ask for permission if they want. And up to today, none of my patients have said no. And I guess when you lie on the table, you are very okay. Anyway, so my patient, my staff, people I work with, they know what I believe. And a good friend of mine always remind me, he's one of my mentors. He told me, you know, the people you work with, your patients, are part of your congregation. So that is one opportunity for them. And the other thing is also, I have people who are with me, one or two people, I call them counselors. And from time to time, we have the opportunity to talk to some of the patients, especially when we go to a field, share the gospel with them. And of course, as a navigator, it is difficult because those are people I may not see again. But if they got an opportunity to hear, that is the most important thing. Yeah.
I think, Jeremy, it's so rich to hear your stories, and we appreciate your being with us today. Everything you do, how integrated your life is, your work, your ministry, your heart, it just all comes through, and it's all the same. There's no distinction. And so we so thank you for being with us and sharing a bit of your life, and wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if you were reading the one thing to be thankful for, if you're reading the subtitles, that the chat GDP is not going to take over the world quite yet. It's got some improving to do on auto translation. So we're going to open it up for some questions here in a second to Wanjau. But Wanjau, can you just share what's going on through business in Africa, as well as Dr. Jeremy or other things?
I think I was listening to Jeremy's story. I think it reminded me of Phil sharing this morning about the promise that is ours in Genesis 12. That I'll make you a great nation. I'll make you a blessings. You'll be a blessings to others. You know, God blesses us so that we can be a blessing. And I think one important thing about enterprise is the blessings it brings to communities. And I think I'm one of those examples myself. I'm here because an uncle of mine who was a businessman decided to invest in my education. So I think business is an avenue that God really uses to bring blessings to the nation. And that's one of the things that has stood out for us as we have served in this whole area and supported businessmen and women like Jeremy to go into business. We want them to really be a blessing. And to see him take eye surgery to the most rural, needy places of Ivory Coast, and train surgeons has been one of those blessings that we are truly thankful to God for.
Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, raise your hand. But so is Dr. Jeremy out there on the field? Does he have a clinic out there, or how's he performing surgery?
He has set up an office in the capital city in Ivory Coast, Abidjan, where he has employed about 10 people, and he has also part-time surgeons that he's training and mentoring and coaching in order to provide eye services. He also has an office where he prescribes glasses and sells medicine to the patients, eye medicines for the patients that attend to him. On top of that, he does organize what he's calling humanitarian eye mobile clinic up in the rural areas to where people cannot reach his office. So he has monthly outreach programs where he goes and performs mobile eye surgery in the rural parts of Ivory Coast, up in the north. The other thing that he's currently doing, and he's trusting God as is part of his growth, is to open a community hospital where those who cannot afford to go to the general hospital, to the government hospitals. One of the leaders in one of the districts outside of Abidjan has given him land, and I think they were breaking ground recently so that they could open an eye hospital for the low end, those who cannot afford the high-end services.
Last night, Henry was sharing his excitement about Africa and what's happening in business as well as what God's doing. Can you share a little bit more about what God's doing throughout all of Africa?
I think one privilege that we have in Africa, and we are truly thankful to God, is just the opportunity to be able to share the gospel in every day of life. I think some of us are still trying to understand what is hard about taking the gospel to the nation. I think the place is very open until today. It's one of those places in the world where going to high schools to share the gospel, they are open doors. You can send people. I can walk into a particular high school and ask permission from the headmaster to be doing Bible studies with students to share the gospel, and they would be open. One of the areas that I think you heard Jeremy talk about, praying with the patients. Most of his patients are actually not Christians. They are actually from North Islamic focused people. And somehow in Africa, the opportunity to share the gospel, there is openness to sharing the gospel freely. And it's an open door that we do not think will always be open. So while God gives us this opportunity, I think we are truly and trusting God that we are able to take the opportunity to share the gospel while it's still today. And we still have that opportunity.
Thanks, Juan.
Thank you.
Any
question about the clinic? About Jeremy? Thank you.
Karen.
Yeah, Wanjau, the generation that's coming out of the university, what do you see the Lord putting on their hearts?
I think one of the things that we see, let me answer that question from two perspectives. One, I think we have younger generation that are thinking of enterprise as the way to go, especially with lack of opportunities to get employment in government, which was, well, my wife and I left college. We were actually having jobs waiting for us in the government. You actually just needed to register and you are posted. Our daughters have had to think they need to create jobs. So there is quite a young entrepreneurial mindset that is happening with the younger generation. Actually, my daughter got a job and she said no. She wanted to try her hands in business. So there is an urge, a yearn to try and go into business. Therefore, when we are trying to encourage people to go into business, it's we're speaking the language of most of the younger generation that is thinking that way, and especially because of lack of unemployment. And then I think they are much more technologically savvy. So a lot of enterprises are beginning to happen in the whole area of using cell phone as a way of marketing, selling, making their products aware, and especially, with a lot of open waves and digitalization of the various places in African market. I think that's beginning to open up that very much.
Thanks. Tony has a question over here.
So, Wanjau, are there countries that you see as particularly significant or that you are giving a kind of priority to in working in? Are there some that are less of a priority, some of them more of a priority?
The navigators are in 32 countries in what we'll call sub-Saharan Africa. When we talk about sub-Saharan Africa, I think we remove the countries around the Mediterranean Sea, what we call MENA region. So the countries that tends to be our main focus are 4. We have an ecosystem of quite a number of entrepreneurs around Zambia, Lusaka, which is in the southern part of the continent. Kenya is another big ecosystem, and that's where this Ministry of Enterprise began in the region. Then we have Nigeria, which is one of our most populous countries, and then we have Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where our ministry in that country has really been developed around business as a way of establishing enterprises in that country. Most of the people who are involved with the work in Ethiopia, practitioners or the navigators, would really be pretty much typical to what happens in Latin America, that most people are in enterprise. So those would be, and then Kampala, Uganda. Those are the areas. Then the emerging one in the second tier would be Abidjan, Ivory Coast, and then and Namibia and Rwanda, Angola.
Okay, Mike has another one.
Wanjau, we heard yesterday that half of Africa is age 18 or younger, and you talked about the difficulty for people who go to university finding jobs. Could you talk about like what percentage of Africans actually go to university compared to those who don't? And I'm just curious, of the people doing entrepreneurship, how many of those that you run into have not gone to university?
Most of the people that the navigators work with, just by the strategy that we adopted for the ministry, has been with those who were going to take up leadership positions. So I would actually say the navigators over the years from 1956 when, about 1954, 1956, when the first missionaries moved to the continent, our focus was with university students, and they targeted certain universities that were probably going to produce leaders for this ministry. So I would actually say quite a big percentage of the people that we work with have a university degree. The last 10 years, the navigators have thought that they want to take the gospel to the unreached people group. And one of the unreached people group that we felt was that majority of people or the population in Africa, it still has not been able to access education. They are illiterate. They have not had 12 years of what you call basic education. And therefore the outreach, and one of the things that we have done in that particular case is training people in how to read the Bible, memorizing oral way of sharing the gospel, using community initiative, D4D, in this particular case has been a very useful tool in the rural parts of Africa. And then on top of that, we have had training programs introducing people to basic financial literacy, because bulk of the people in rural part of Africa do not have financial literacy that a typical child in the north would have had an opportunity of even having a bank account. My dad died age 88, and he had never seen the inside of a bank. So was my mom and my grandmother. So it's quite a number of people of that population that we've talked about that I would actually say are financially illiterate. So even beginning to talk about developing a business plan is a skill that we have had to introduce in the ministries across Africa. So we would actually have a strategy that looks like this. We would start with financial literacy and training, exposing the young people into training them on enterprise or business skills, what we'll call business one-on-one. Then the next bit, we would start them off on small grants or small loans to start small enterprises, then grow them up when the enterprises have grown to what we call small and medium enterprises. So depending on the level of growth of the ministry in a particular country, we would apply different strategy to try and reach out the various people that we work with that way.
Thanks. We have time for maybe one more if anybody has a question. Otherwise, we can take a break. Last question. Koki here.
Yes. A typical concern in Africa is all those civil wars and the insecurity, and how much does that hinders business development, or it depends upon the country?
I think it's been much more of a misnomer that there has been civil war in Africa. I think it's only a few countries that in the last 10 years have had what I would call a civil war. I think from the year 2000, we have had less and less, and I think most governments have become a bit more democratic, a bit more rule of law, a bit more open, and realizing that business is the way to go. And the countries that tends to be a little bit more difficult in terms of administrative are learning from their neighbors, that the countries that seems to be doing well. So you would find a country like Rwanda, for example, which had a lot of civil war, has become more or less an example of a place to do business. So I would actually say that there is less and less of what you would call as typical civil war in the region. I think our biggest challenge is probably corruption. Having to deal with the monies and the challenge of doing business in a way that's God's honoring in most places in Africa. So the biggest challenge is getting or training those that we are working with to be people of integrity, to be salt and light in the marketplaces, to bring on the shalom values in the marketplace rather than civil war. Of course, elections tends to bring about some turmoil in some places and bring some stability, but of late, actually, I would say not many countries have had issues of civil war in the region.
Well, thank you, Wanjau. I appreciate it.